Welcome to my world history notes, where I read from the book I wrote to teach homeschoolers about world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. You can find it on ludo.com, amazon.com, at the Bible Baptist bookstore, or just follow me here. I'm going to talk today about continental Europe, and we're gonna talk about the time, between 500 and 1000 A.D. after Christ, Anno Domini. We're in continental Europe. The greatest of medieval kings who ruled an empire comprising modern France and Germany was born in 742. His name was Charlemagne. The Merovingian dynasty had ruled the Frankish tribes in what is now France since before the Great Clovis in the late 400s forced Catholic Christianity upon his subjects. This line of kings eventually became ineffectual and basically worthless, but had produced strong major domos, or mayors of the palace, who did their fighting for them, like Charles Martel the Hammer, among others, who had defeated the Muslims invaders at Tours in 732, thereby stopping the northern advance of Islam into the rest of Europe from Spain. Pepin III overthrew the impotent Merovingians and began the Carolingian Dynasty with Pope Zacharias' blessing. This dynasty ruled the Franks from 751 to 987. Charlemagne was his son. Charlemagne, Charlemagne became the sole king after his brother died in 771. He aided Pope Hadrian II in his sorry about that, cat. He aided Pope Adrian II in his struggle against the Lombard king Desiderius, who had invaded the states directly controlled by the papacy. Charlemagne's victory allowed him to claim Lombardy, part of Italy, as his own. Returning to his capital of Aachen, he began a series of 53 campaigns that carved out an empire consisting of Germany, France, and part of Italy. He allied himself with one Muslim king in Spain after against another, but was forced to return home due to revolt in German Saxony. As he retreated through the Pyrenees, he was attacked by a force of Basques who wiped out his rear guard. This resulted in the epic poem, The Song of Roland, which was written down 3 centuries later. Finally, Charlemagne did conquer a strip of northeast Spain for his empire. By becoming the military wing of the papacy and forcing his empire to accept the Roman Catholic religion, Charlemagne became a type of the Antichrist to come. In 800, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. By receiving the crown from the Pope, he affirmed, even if unwittingly, as some historians say, the Pope's authority over kings and princes, and created the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne was a ruthless dictator who was especially cruel, Durant says, in spreading Roman Catholic Christianity by force of arms. He had 4 wives and 5 concubines, and many illegitimate children, and even encouraged his daughters to forbear marriage, and they also produced many illegitimate offspring. He finally died in 814 and is said to have been buried with his finger pointed to an open Latin Vulgate on his chest, open to Matthew 16:26, although a later emperor, Otto III, reported that when he opened Charlemagne's tomb, he was sitting up on a throne and no open Bible was in his sight. As is the case with most great conquerors, his successors were incompetent and quarrelsome. Viking invasions and demands for territory weakened their power significantly, as did constant infighting and civil wars. When Louis V died in 987, the nobles of France, with the approval of their archbishop, elected Hugh Capet as king. The Capetian rule would rule France until the Revolution. The western part of France had been lost to the Normans, Vikings, who had also established a strong base in the island of Sicily and other parts of Europe. Virtually the modern states of Italy, Germany, France, although not by those names, had been partitioned by the Treaty of Verdun in 843, with different kings receiving different grants of territory. Throughout the first part of the Dark Ages, what's called the Dark Ages, the Jews lived a miserable existence, but God's mercy permitted them to grow in influence in both Catholic Europe and the Islamic world. Jewish communities sprung up everywhere. In the cities of Palestine and Babylonia, the Jewish scribes created great bodies of law and commentary known as the Palestinian and Babylonian Talmuds. Their great dispute was over the divine origin of not just the written law that Moses had left them, but of the oral law which had passed down from priest to priest, the traditions of men which Jesus so roundly condemned. The Mishnah, or oral teaching, was designed for memory by repetition and was the theme of many schools of rabbinical thought. Durant puts it this way, quote, Israel now had a law, but no state, a book, but no home. To 614, Jerusalem was a Christian city, till 629, Persian, till 637, again Christian, then till 1099, a Muslim provincial capital, unquote. In Frankish lands, the Merovingian kings persecuted them mercilessly. Although there are stories of Charlemagne using Jews in various professions and protecting them in that regard, one king even threatened that if they did not convert to Catholicism, he'd have their eyes torn out. Jews were often advisors to kings in medicine and other sciences. The Spanish Jews called themselves Sephardim, traced their origin to the tribe of Judah. Before the Muslims conquered Spain, the Visigothic kings of Spain made life miserable for them. The Jews, therefore, were very helpful when the Moors of North Africa and the Arabs invaded in 711. The Muslims encouraged immigration, and 50,000 Jews came from Palestine and North Africa, and some towns were completely inhabited by Jews. However, in 1066, the favored Jewish aristocracy that had been encouraged by enlightened Muslim rulers came to an end when Arab Spaniards revolted, crucified the most prominent Jewish advisor to their king, and massacred 4,000 Jews at Granada. The long peace between all Spanish Jews and Muslims came to an end within two decades of that event. Groups of Christians who did not follow or submit to either the Bishop of Rome or the Patriarch of Constantinople continued from the time of the apostles to the Reformation and beyond. I've mentioned several groups in previous talks, but a mention from Fox's Acts and Monuments will suffice to show what danger they face by refusing to adopt infant baptism or the authority of the Pope or Patriarch. Welsh Christians were faced with a Roman Catholic missionary named Austin, who, when the Celtic Christians he faced refused to accept infant baptism, had them slaughtered. The majority of the Welsh submitted to the dictates of the papacy after that. Acts and Monuments offers a revealing look at the history of New Testament Christianity, the minority, running alongside of the state church of the Dark Ages. As in 1 Kings 19:18, God kept a remnant of believers separate who did not follow the herd. I've spoken of several important dates here with many momentous events happening around the end of the first millennium AD. This particular time is worthy of note as a natural dividing, separating what they call the Dark Ages, which wasn't dark, but that's what you're going to hear, into two sections, as traditional historians insist, separating the dark from the Middle Ages or the medieval period. The conquest of England by the Danes, the fall of the Carolingians in France, and the Muslim invasion of Spain made the first millennium AD appear as if it was to be the last. The world appeared to be engulfed in a cataclysmic political and religious events. In the book The First Apocalypse by James Reston Jr., Europe at the year 1000 AD is discussed. He goes into great detail about the political, religious, and ethnic upheavals in Europe at the end of the age. Other chroniclers tell us that Viking and Muslim invasions, Magyar invasions from the east, the fall of the once victorious Frankish dynasties, and general uncertainty led many to surrender their land to the Roman Church itself and wait humbly and often terrified for the end of history. When it didn't happen the way they thought it would, those foolish enough to have surrendered their property to the church of the so-called Vicar of Christ, sitting in churches awaiting the end, learned that it was lost to them forever. Now we're going to go on to England. We have to discuss some things in England and Central Europe and move on from there. Thank you very much, and I hope that you'll study world history and come to your own conclusions. And even if they're different than mine, which they probably will be, because I'm doing this from the point of view of a Bible believer, and you may not be. You might even be an atheist. It's important to me that you have opinions that you've studied. That's important. Not important that you agree with me. All right. Thank you.